Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In this week's National Interest, we are raising three questions. One, is Narendra Modi an economic reformer? Two, if he is an economic reformer, is he capable of implementing his reforms as well? And number three, if he is a reformer, where does he rank on the list of India's acknowledged reformers? That is Narasimha Rao, P.V. Narasimha Rao, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So where does Narendra Modi rank with them? Now, you might say that I am nuts to be asking whether he can implement his ideas or whether he has reformist ideas, because if you look at all the announcements he's made, all the slogans he's given, notably minimum government, maximum governance, government should get out of business, he has a reformist mind in terms of ideas, in terms of also big plans. He's talked of, in fact, financial sector reform, manufacturing reform, banking reform, railway reform, aviation reform, land use reform, all kinds of reforms, but very little has happened. Only thing that we have seen happen, one is the bankruptcy code, and second, in a qualified way, the implementation of the GST. Qualified way because it's been quite chaotic the way it's been done. Second, you might say, Shekhar Gupta, you have to be nuts to think that Modi doesn't have the power to do this. Modi has more power than anybody in India's history, which is true. Here is a man with such power that he could demonetize 86% of all of India's currency and lock down the entire country of 138 crore at 4-hour notice at 8 p.m. Right? No cabinet, no consulting chief ministers, nothing. That's real power. And that's also real decisiveness. But the devil, as they say, lies in the detail when it comes to reform. Now look at so many of his reform ideas which have come up but which have got stalled. I will just list some with the help of Ramya Nair, who's our senior associate editor for economic affairs. This is not a definitive list. You can go along, you can add along as we proceed further. So see, first of all, in 2019, there was a committee set up for direct taxes reform. It's been about a year. Not only forget being implemented, that report has not even been made public, so you can't even debate or discuss it. It's flying in what George Fernandez once described beautifully by way of telling us the problems with defense purchases, bureaucrats sending the file into orbit. So when a file goes into Government of India's orbit, it just keeps orbiting idly or pointlessly without any destination. Kuch nahi hota uska. So that file is one of the many files like that. Similarly, all the other reforms, banking reform, PSU bank reform, it stalled, barring some little merger here and there. The longer tenure for PSU chiefs, not done. Accountability for PSU boards, PSU bank boards, not done. Autonomy to PSU bank managements, not done. Privatization of PSU banks, you can forget about it. Not even a thought of that. If at all, we've seen more good money thrown after bad money in PSU banks, and that money has also disappeared. Look at other areas of reform. Power, you started with a good idea, that was Uday. It was messed up. So the same power utilities in the states which took benefit from Uday are bankrupt once again. So yet again, a third attempt is being made under the same government now to bring about power reform. That's part of the the pandemic time reform announcements by the Modi government. Land use reform. Modi government started with big bang, that is the new land acquisition law. But it immediately got deflated. It was a balloon that you can blame Rahul Gandhi for deflating it with suit and boot. But he did that, and that balloon came down. Since then, for 6 years, Narendra Modi has not revisited that. Labor law reforms. And the states have done drastic things in desperation. The fact is that Government of India's labor codes, new labor codes have been pending. And while those are a substantive improvement over the past, they're still not quite reformist enough. Now you will need to make more changes in them, and then pass them quickly if you want to have any chance of attracting any manufacturing that is now getting disillusioned with China. It will take you a long time. You haven't yet done it. So many other reforms are stuck like that. Privatization. In 6 years, even a government with Narendra Modi's power and majority has not been able to sell a single PSU except to itself. That itself is like, once we had said earlier in national interest, like Milo Minder Bender trading with himself in catch 22 at the cost of the state. So that's what this government has been doing, getting ONGC to buy HPCL, getting LIC to buy something else, just buying and selling, taking money from one pocket of yours to put it in the other pocket of yours. So that is no privatization and that is no reform. The fact is that in 6 years, this government has even failed to sell Air India. Today you might blame it on market conditions, but the fact is that in the previous tenure, the plan document that was, the sale document that was created was so complicated, it would have taken the intellect of a Lord Shiva to decipher it, and it would have taken the courage and strength of a Lord Hanuman to buy Air India based on that, because the risk then was spending the rest of your life and time with CBI, CVC, CBDT, and who knows, and courts, and who knows, even in jail. So why is it so that almost every major reformist idea that this government has come up with has gone wrong? So in my book, I am arguing today that on reformist ideas, Modi gets A+, very good ranking. On reform implementation, he gets C-, because barring bankruptcy code and to some extent GST, nothing has got implemented. And on the rankings, he gets a B-. Why B-? Essentially on the strength of the bankruptcy code, GST, which is qualified, and couple of other small things here and there, including merger of some PSU banks. That's a reform as well. That's all. Now, why has he got stuck like this in spite of his power, while his predecessor, because of this, he doesn't really rank very high with the other three reformers. He still has to make that mark. So where has he got stuck, or why has he come unstuck in spite of some good ideas? You have to go back to 1991 to see how reform worked. The political direction for reform came from Narasimha Rao's minority government. It was a minority government for 5 years. That government came with political direction for reform, put Dr. Manmohan Singh as finance minister. But then who were the Sherpas who hauled that heavy baggage of reform up the steep mountain of protectionism, resistance, bureaucratic silos, socialist baggage, Cold War nostalgia, everything? They were a stellar bunch of officers, civil servants. That's why I call them Sherpas. Now, who were they? There were three categories of them. So I'm taking you back to 91. One category were economist bureaucrats. These are bureaucrats who were trained in economics or who were educated in economics formally to a high level, but had then qualified and joined the IAS. That is N.K. Singh, Y.V. Reddy, K. Subbarao, and some others around them. Then you have people who were economist bureaucrats. First was bureaucrat economists, second is economist bureaucrats. These are people who were economists to begin with full-time, did not join the IAS, but served in bureaucratic positions in the government. These are again formidable people. Montek Singh Ahluwalia was finance secretary at a very young age under Dr. Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao. Not IAS. Vijay Kelkar, Bimal Jalan. These were people who were not IAS, and many others. When you see the article, you will find some more names. And then they were top class bureaucrats or bureaucrats. In fact, there was Naresh Chandra, who held every position that was worth holding in terms of India's economy and national security, but we are talking more of the economy now, and headed every committee with any bearing on economic reform that mattered between, say, up to, say, 2009 or 10 or so. Naresh Chandra. Then A.N. Verma in Prime Minister's office. He was Principal Secretary under Rao. These were bureaucrats who knew how to get things done in the Indian system. They knew when to, they had the skills to navigate through it. They also had the strength to railroad their way through it, call people, call ministers, call ministries, and get things moving. So they were the ones who got it all done. Then they were all given a long enough tenure. Now, apologies if you think that I'm not listing everybody. This is not a definitive list, and if you go to the article in text, there are some more names. There were many. There was K.P. Geetakrishnan. There was also Piyush Mankad, who had served, who had held many economic jobs, but is a career civil servant. So many of them specialized and learned and worked together. Now, those governments also gave these civil servants long tenures as economic bureaucrats, whether they're economist bureaucrats or bureaucrat economists or bureaucrat bureaucrats. Because they worked together for a long time, they developed also camaraderie and understanding between them. Also then, say, multilateral agencies or rating agencies, they all knew which names to reach out to in India, which numbers to call. So there was a consistency of policies, etc. Modi governments have been shuffling people very quickly. Now, why were those officers more effective than the bureaucracy of today? Frankly, I am giving the fans of Narendra Modi an alibi. That why is it so that they were more effective than today? The alibi is that Narendra Modi's bureaucracy is not able to implement his ideas, not even at a fraction of the success rate of reformers of the past. One, because these were civil servants and economist civil servants who had grown up, who had served in the 60s and the 70s. So one, they had tasted power of that past when Bharat Sarkar was Mai Baap Sarkar. So they had tasted that power. Reform meant giving those powers away for India's bureaucracy. Because they had enjoyed those, they were less possessive about letting go. That was the essence of reform. Second, because they were the children of the license quota Raj, they knew how difficult it was, what kind of a misery and what kind of shortages that India had because of that license quota Raj and because of the unreformed economy. So even if you were an all-powerful civil servant, you still had to wait maybe 3 years to buy a Premier Padmini or a Fiat, old model Fiat car, a 3-year waiting list, even on an IAS officer's quota. Or they had personal lived experiences, stories that say Montek Singh Ahluwalia and N.K. Singh tell you of going to New York for a big multilateral negotiation and finding that the hotel there would not check them in because their Indian credit cards were not valid overseas. So, or going to Geneva and discovering to their mortification that by sniffing for petrol in a lift, you could tell whether an Indian had been in that lift in that hotel or not. You know why? Because if an Indian had been there, the lift would smell of petrol. The reason being that India still had control Raj, so import of modern dry cleaning equipment was not allowed. So you were still dry cleaning with petrol and your clothes smelled of petrol. So they came back and made those changes, made Indian credit cards valid globally, which is something that all of us have got used to now. Also allowed the import of new dry cleaning machines. Now you don't smell petrol anywhere, even small towns, your corner dry cleaners in the corner of your street also have modern machines. So there was a wealth of lived experiences that those civil servants had. One, of enjoying power, and second, of suffering the pain of an unreformed economy. So they had a double incentive to reform. And second, because they had in the mix these economists, qualified economists who were not IAS officers but working now in the government system, so they got used to work in the government system. At the same time, our bureaucrats, career bureaucrats, constantly got this intellectual input from these. So they worked together. In that jointmanship, India's economy reformed, changed, flowered, boomed. What do we have now? What we have now is today's secretaries, for example, in Government of India, who are driving everything, every ministry, including the Prime Minister's office. They are essentially of the 85, 6, 87, those kinds of batches, say mid 80s, late 80s kind of batches. So these are people who never really saw or experienced the troubles of the license quota Raj or of an unreformed economy. They are people I would call as the first of India's color TV generation, because color TV to India came only in 1982 during the Asian Games in Delhi. So they have not seen, they don't have much experience or much memory of the black and white India, when again there were queues, there were shortages, you got $20 if you were going overseas. And even I, as a journalist, to travel overseas to cover a war, had to line myself up at Reserve Bank of India and get a permit to get $165 a day for everything. So they haven't seen those days. They are essentially children of a reformed India. Now that has two consequences. One, they don't have the same impetus to reform now because they haven't seen the, let me say, slavery of an unreformed economy, so they don't see the need to liberate themselves or liberate the rest of the country. And second, they haven't quite enjoyed the power they would have had as true bureaucrats, true blue bureaucrats in a My Baap Sarkar system. Now they are enjoying that power, one because of Narendra Modi's power and the powerlessness of his ministers who can't even stand up to their, who can't even order their bureaucrats around, mostly because they all look up to the PM for instructions and orders. But second, and more importantly, now you've seen with this lockdown, these civil servants are enjoying powers that India's civil servants lost a long time back. For example, today these civil servants, by writing a memo, can put the entire country under a night curfew. 120, you are a country of 138 crore demented children. You will not step out at night after 9 PM up to 5 AM because remember, as mummy told you, there are dangers in the dark. Don't step out after 9 PM. They have such powers today that by writing a memo, they can tell you, if you live in the green zone, you can have tutti frutti ice cream. If you live in the yellow zone, maybe you can have strawberry. If you live in the red zone, you can only have vanilla once in 3 days, and that too if I am able to deliver it to your home. Now, you are asking this bureaucracy now to implement any big ideas of reform. Don't waste our time. Say thank you very much, we are at least governing you. And remember, we are still learning to write a clean memo. Remember, Naresh Chandra, A.N. Verma, Piyush Mankad, Geeta Krishnan, people like them, nobody would write a memo under them that will have to be rewritten 3 times after that, which is the norm these days. So it's a combination of all this that so many good ideas also have not been implemented because these civil servants have tasted so much power, don't have sufficient team strength, and frankly haven't learned to write a clean memo yet.